Hello CS112, so I'll be going over a quick solution to lab 10, which has to do with dictionaries. At the end, I will also just briefly go over, just at a high level, how to work with dictionaries. Just give a quick overview because I know this programming assignment is pretty hard. All right, just to dive right into it, you were to write and test a function called vacation destinations that takes a 2D list of places and turns it into a dictionary with the name as the key, so on and so forth. But I think just looking at the description here is the easiest way to understand what to do. So you're going to be given one parameter, which is a 2D list, and each of these sublists will contain various strings and an integer at the end. What you want to do is build a dictionary where each of these sublists is going to represent a key value pair in your return dictionary, where the key is the first element and the rest of the elements are going to be the value as a list in that key value pair. So let's do this thing. So I'm going to create def vacation destinations. I'm going to create a parameter. Let's just call it locations because that makes sense. And then I'm going to want to iterate through my locations, right? So I can grab these values and work with them. I'm going to say for I in excuse me in range length locations. Now, what is this going to do? Well, what would happen right now if I was to just print out I? What would happen if I printed out locations? This is all stuff that we should know in theory by now. But let me just actually run that real quick. Where am I? Give me 1 second here. Okay, so if I was to run this right now with just printing out I, what would I get? I mean, obviously I can't hear what you guys are going to say. Well, obviously nothing because I haven't called the function. So if I was to actually call this function, so let me actually print out the return value of that function call here. So if I was to actually call this, it would print out the indices. We can ignore the none, that's not important, but it would print out the indices. So I is just the indices. So if I was to print out locations at index I, that would print out the actual sublists themselves. So each iteration will be dealing with an entire sublist with location I. So now I know that. So now I'm just going to leave that as a comment so I can reference that, so I know how to work with each of these sublists. Now, the most important syntax, in my opinion, for when working with dictionaries is this syntax right here. It's you have a dictionary. Let's call it dictionary name in brackets. I'm going to say key name, and I'm going to set it equal to a value. So this will do two potential things. Whatever you say, whenever you have a dictionary, and you pass in a key name in these brackets and you set it equal to a value, the first thing it will do is it will check if this key already exists in this dictionary. If it does exist, it will update the value of this key to equal this value. If it does not exist, if this key name does not exist in this dictionary, it will create a new key value pair. So I should have already created a return dictionary because we need to create and return a dictionary. So I'm just going to call it my answer, set that equal to a dictionary, just an empty one. And I'm just going to use this syntax here to solve this entire question because this is the most important dictionary syntax in my opinion. So to do that, again, dictionary name, key name equals value. So what is our dictionary name? Well, we called it answer up here. What is our key name? So we know that we want our key to be the first, the 0th index or the first element in each of these sublists here. And we know that a sublist is going to be at locations I. So to index it one further, so location I0 is going to be each of these 0th indices. Location I1 will be each of these, so on and so forth. So I know that my key is going to be at locations I, which is going to represent an entire sublist at the 0th index. This is going to grab the 0th index of each of these sublists. So that is going to be the key for this dictionary, and I'm going to set that value equal to, what am I setting the value equal to? Well, each of these sublists minus that first index, right? And you guys have learned slicing in this class, so that this just makes it incredibly easy. So if I take that same sublist that I'm working with each time, because we confirms that locations I is a sublist, I can just slice it directly off by the first elements. So I'm not going to dive into too much what slicing is because you guys should in theory know that. But just to quickly run down what this will do for every iteration, let's look at the very first iteration. So during this first iteration, when we call this function, I'm just going to copy this right here as a little thing to look at. I, during the first iteration, is going to equal this sublist, or locations I. Sorry, so locations I. So this guy is going to equal this sublist here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take locations I at 0. So this is locations I at 0. I'm going to make this my key. So in theory, it will look like Venice is going to equal locations at I0. So locations I is this entire sublist here. And by setting it, by doing this, this slices the list from the first index all the way to the end. When you have no parameter here, that just means just go all the way to the end. So by the first index all the way to the end, and that's going to be my value, just this amount of the list. So this alone can directly solve this entire problem for you, just this one line inside the for loop, which is why just getting comfortable with this syntax here is absolutely key. So if I was to run this code now, well, I have no, it says none, just so you guys know, because I'm printing out the return value to this function call, and I am not returning anything inside this function, so it would actually help to return answer. So if I was to run this real quick, we do not get the correct answer, which is perfectly fine. We can, well, I should have changed this back to locations I at 0. And now when I run this, it will actually work where I get the key value pairs as they should be. Now, if you guys do have any specific questions on this lab, feel free to ask, but I am quickly just going to run through working with dictionaries at a high level because, I mean, this is a hard programming assignment that we're working on right now. And I'm going to be using this dictionary just to walk through since we're all familiar with it. All right, let's work with this dictionary. So I know that there are a lot of methods or functions that you guys had to learn, but we'll just go through literally all of them. So for I in titles values, what would happen right now if I just have a very vanilla for loop? Actually, we'll do this one at the end. So the three things you guys have learned is dot values, tiles dot values. If you were to print I out here and run it, I would just simply represent each of the values in the key value pair. So by values, I literally just mean 1, 3, 3, 2, 3. That will print out all the values. If you wanted to make them keys, you can use dot keys as well, and that will print out all the keys instead. If you wanted both of them at the same time, you can use dot items, but you would need to add a second parameter here. So let's just say ij, and I could print out I comma j, and when I run this, it'll print out the keys and their values all next to each other here. So just getting comfortable with kind of understanding when you're iterating through a dictionary and knowing which is super, super important. But now when I was in 112, I never really used any of these dictionary methods, well, mainly because we were restricted. But you can do all of this stuff without using items or values or anything like that, just with that same syntax that we talked about before. So if I was to just print out I right now, what would that do? Will it do anything? Yes, it will print out all the keys. Well, how can I grab the values? Well, I can print out, if we remember that syntax before of you have dict name, key name, and value. Well, if I want to grab the value, I can print out this portion of it. So if I was to print out tiles values at the key I, because I is representing each key as we just printed out, we can get each of the, well, I'm printing out both right now, so let me comment this out. If I was to do this, we can get the actual values. So you necessarily don't even need to use any dot items, dot whatever. If that's confusing for you, you can just directly use like I to get each of the keys and dictionary name key inside here to get each of the values. I hope this helps. If it doesn't, you can always ask questions on Piazza.